made me think of iCarly. And he's like,
This is your iCarly show.
So, because it's just, it sounded the same. Anywho, okay, let me collect myself. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Holistic Doula Haven. I'm Kiara, a birth and postpartum doula, and here we are creating a safe space for everyone to feel empowered and informed about their decision making throughout their pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience. If you don't know what a doula is, basically it's a non-medical support person for people who are expecting, going into a birth space or postpartum. I'm a holistic doula, so I take into account the mind, body, and spirit in addition to all the other things. If you want a deeper dive on what I do and what that looks like, you can watch the first 2 episodes or listen to them, where I go into more detail. But today is going to be about the do's and don'ts from a doula's perspective. As a doula, I've supported lots of families through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And there's some things that happen multiple times in like a pattern sort of way, that kind of make things more difficult, or that I feel like it could be easier for them to transition from no kids to having a kid, or in the birth space, or just in general. So I'm going to shed a little bit of light on that. So we'll talk about communicating effectively with your birth preferences, having the right support system, being informed about all of your options, and then trusting your body and intuition, and how to avoid or navigate the downfalls of feeling pressured into anything that has to do with pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, how to properly take care of yourself throughout the postpartum experience, and how to properly ask for help. So whether you're preparing for birth, or you've already had your baby and you're just looking for advice or tips, or you are supporting somebody else, so whether you're the partner or you have a friend who's expecting, or you just kind of want to know for your own knowledge how to empower yourself, this is the episode for you. So one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to be clear on what you want for your birth. No judgment. There's a lot of times where I ask women what they hope for their birth, and they're just like, oh, we'll just kind of see what happens. And then we get into this space, and there's a lot of things that go wrong, or the fears that they had kept to themselves come true. And I'm like, oh, like we could have prepared for this. Or we prepare for a certain type of birth, and then the unexpected happens and they don't feel prepared anymore because it wasn't talked about, or they didn't want to hear about it. So having the right birth preferences and knowing how to communicate them effectively can help. And I say preferences, some of you might be like, isn't that the same as a birth plan? No, it's not. I say birth preferences just because, like, it's all up to the baby. You could do everything correctly, or all the things that you need to do to prepare for the birth that you want, but the baby really doesn't care about your plan. The baby's like, I'm coming how I'm coming and when I'm coming. So take me, for example, when my mom was in labor with me and she was fully dilated, ready to go, I decided to rotate out of position, what they call a transverse position. So I was head down and I decided to be elsewhere, and then I fell asleep. So that resulted in lots of pain for my mom. The doctor had to externally rotate me, which is just as painful as it sounds. I just didn't feel like coming, I guess. I was like, I think I'll chill for a little bit longer. She always tells me that I was her most painful birth out of 5. I think it's a blessing because I was like, well, you got the best kid out of it. So, the other sisters don't agree, but it's okay. Number 3 is a nice number. So creating a birth preference list or document, I always suggest, but keeping it flexible. So there are some things where I'm like, you can be firm in that decision. For example, getting an epidural. If you're planning a hospital birth, if you're absolutely sure that you do not want an epidural, having that in your preferences, that's something that you can be firm in. Something that you might not be able to be firm in is having your OB there. A lot of times they don't show up. It's somebody else because hospitals work in shift work. So, if you have a long labor or you go into labor like close to the end of your OB's shift, they might not be there for it. So that those are certain things that like you kind of have to be flexible. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't write it down. But just like be open-minded that the plan might change. But like highlight what's most important to you. So wherever you're giving birth, if you want like a calm environment and like whatever aesthetic you want, if you want like low lights and calm music and like essential oils, have that in your birth plan or your birth preference. If you feel like that's gonna make your experience that much more positive. With home births, it's a little bit easier to navigate those things, just because it's your home and like that's your space. So everything that you want is already there. In a hospital, you kind of have to make the space your own. So like bringing whatever comfort items and things that you want into that space to make it that much better. Um, and then like pain management preferences. If you're like, I only want to try laughing gas or whatever they call it. Can't remember the name. But like the little mask that they put on their face, if that's the only medical intervention that you want, you can write that. Or if you don't want an epidural and you've discussed with your doula or your partner, don't offer me an epidural unless I ask for them. Put it in your birth preference. So please do not offer me an epidural. When you're in your birth mind, it's very easy to change your mind quickly. When you're in a lot of pain, you kind of go into like a fight or flight mode. So you get scared, of course, and then, you might end up making a decision that you didn't want. Delayed cord clamping, same thing. If that's really important to you, have it in your birth preferences sheet. And discussing it with your support team. So I always tell people to discuss it with whoever their medical provider is, whether that's a midwife or an obstetrician. Tell them about it when it gets close to your due date. Don't tell them in the first trimester. They're not going to remember. So when it's close to like birth time, be like, this is what I'm hoping for my birth. This is how I would envision it to go. You can even give it to them so that they can put it in your file and just have it there for whenever you go into labor, especially if they're not there. And then if you have a doula, share it with your doula as well, because those physical things like changing the environment, having low lights, having oils, having music, we can bring that stuff for you. So having those things, like sharing it with whoever's a part of your team, can make it much easier to navigate it properly, rather than just kind of like going in and seeing how it goes, which is also fine. If that's how you feel it'll help, like if that's how you want to do it, like there's no wrong or right way to prepare for birth. It's literally however you want it to happen, or however you would hope for it to happen. Like I said, it's up to the baby. So you can do everything under the sun and your baby might not care. As long as they're healthy. And then as well, telling your provider is good because when you're in labor, you do not want to answer 500,000 questions about like what you want and what things might help. It's so much easier to just have it written down so that the nurses can just look at it and make sure that they do all that they can to help you. And something I always tell my clients, like I'm like, do not bring like a booklet of things that you want. Nobody's reading that. I'm not reading it and you're not reading it either. The nurses are definitely not going to read it. So like you can make a big plan, discuss it with your doula, and then go over the most important things and make it like a cute little 1-page document. I always tell my clients to word it like, please help me to achieve my birth goals in doing blah, 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 blah. Nurses are more likely to cater to what you want when you word it in a way that's like, support me in this, rather do this for me. Do not be a momzilla. They don't like those. It's not a fun experience for everybody. You're in pain, but that's no excuse to be mean. A lot of people think that you can just do that. I'm like, no, like, that's not how we behave. And then in terms of having a team, that goes into the next point, to build a strong support system. So, even if you don't have a doula, just making sure you have the people around you that you want, whether it's your best friend or your partner, your mom, your dad, literally whoever you want in the birth room with you. Just making sure that they're on board with how everything is gonna go and like what you want. A lot of times I find with older generations, sometimes certain people can compare, like, well, back when I gave birth, this and that was how we did things. And I'm like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore, kind of thing. So like discussing with all those people, this is what I want, because yes, it's someone else's baby too, but you're the one who's doing all the hard work in terms of actually giving birth to the baby. So it's really important to make sure that everybody is in line with what you want. And that's kind of where doulas can help, to make sure that everybody understands, and teaching people how to talk to people about their birth plans and preferences. I've had lots of conversations with moms where, for example, their mother-in-law wants to be in the room, because it's their grandchild and they want to see life, happening. I'm like, okay, become a doula as well, and then you can see everybody's baby being born. And lots of moms are very uncomfortable having the conversation of, no, like, I don't want you in the room, especially if they want their own mom in the room, but not like the other person. They're like, oh, like, what about their support? I'm like, it's not really about them. So I like to kind of help people have those difficult conversations. I'm like, even if you don't want to have like a one-on-one confrontation, I'm like, if there's multiple people that are going to be unhappy with your choices for how you choose to give birth, send it in a group chat, like a group text. Hey, everybody, this is what we're doing. This is what we've discussed. Please respect our decision. If they don't, they revoke all their rights on their own, and they don't need to see the baby. But that's just me. But yeah, talk to your doula about those things, or your partner, or whomever, if it's becoming an issue. Make sure everybody's on board. And then surround yourself with supportive people. So, for example, if it's just you and your partner, and your parents live in another country or another province, and there's no way that they're able to come here, or the baby decides to come early, something happens, and the people that you wanted there are not able to be there, just having a plan in place on, this is what we're going to do if XYZ happens, can really help people to kind of feel okay with whatever goes on in the birth space, and just people who respect you. You do not want somebody who's secretly wishing that things will go a different way. There are people like that. So you want people who make you feel empowered and confident in your birth space. And that can really contribute to the birth and your postpartum experience. In addition to that, the third point is staying informed about all your options. So a part of feeling empowered is knowing what options you have. You won't know what you don't know. So understanding your medical rights as an individual. You always have the right to ask any question. You always have the right to refuse any procedures, treatments. You always have the right to get a second opinion. If you live in Alberta or Canada, sometimes it's not as easy to like find somebody quickly to get a second opinion. But you have the right to question any decision. Something that's really important to know is that it's like policy is not law. So the hospital might be like, well, it's our policy that you can't eat in labor. Okay. Am I going to get arrested if I eat in labor? Probably not. So, just knowing what your rights are as the person giving birth, because at the end of the day, like, this is your experience, and any little thing that you don't want to happen can impact everything afterwards. And then knowing what options you have for like pain relief, especially if you're like giving birth in a hospital. There's epidurals, there's nitrous oxide, now I remember the word, which is the laughing gas. There's the shower or the tub, depending on where you're giving birth and what hospital room you're in. And then there's unmedicated birth, which is like all the hands-on stuff. You have lots of options for how to get through the contractions. So if you have a doula, talk to them about what options you have. Go to birthing classes. If you don't have a doula, just like try to stay informed by like watching videos, or like if you don't want to go to a birthing class, you can even ask your OB if you have one, what the options are, especially if you don't want a medicated birth. Communicating that, I'm being like, hey, like I don't want these things. What are my other choices? And then a big one is looking into postpartum care. A lot of people focus heavily on the pregnancy and the birth, and then they forget about postpartum until they're in it. So preparing for postpartum is really important. It's more than just like buying stuff for the baby and setting up the nursery and, catching up on your sleep at the end of your pregnancy. There's a lot of emotional stuff with it and mental stuff that you might not be expecting. And then just like the physical recovery of postpartum, depending on how your birth was. But also just like having a baby in general, there's going to be lots of exhaustion. You're trying to figure out how to be a new parent. You're trying to figure out how to take care of this little human being. So just like preparing, reading up. Again, there's classes that you can take for postpartum. There's like feeding classes and things like that, newborn care classes, just knowing all the things that there is to know, just so you have like a general idea. That being said, even if you take every single class, sometimes it's still like a reality shock. You get in it and then you're like, they didn't talk about this in the class. So that kind of goes hand in hand with being flexible, just knowing that like it's not black and white. It's not going to be like the movies. It's going to be however it is, depending on your baby. Babies are always running the show in birth and postpartum as well. And then just trusting yourself and your intuition is the next point. So, we all have intuition, which is what people call the gut feeling. It's the same thing. We all have it. So if you feel deep down inside that something doesn't sit well with you, or there's something specific that you want, trust it. Don't doubt it. Even if you doubt it, talk to somebody about it, whether it's your partner, your doula, your mom, your dad, your cousin. Talk to somebody about it. Kind of navigate through those feelings. But don't ignore those signs. So if something feels wrong, speak up about it, whether it's during one of your prenatal appointments with your doctor or actually in the birth space. Speak up about it. If something feels right, go with it. If you feel like your provider's not listening to you, find a new one or call them out on it, depending on how confrontational you are. Some people, like me, are not as confrontational when it comes to those stuff. But But yeah, you can find a new one. Another thing a lot of people don't know in the birth space, I always word it like this just because it sounds more fun. You can fire your doctor or your nurse. So if they're not listening to you, they're annoying, they're being disrespectful, whatever, you can either tell them to their face, yeah, actually, I don't like your energy. I don't want you in my room anymore. They cannot argue with it. Like I said, hospital policy is not law. So if you don't want them caring for you anymore, they don't have to. Same thing with OBs. Lots of people ask, like, can I fire my OB? Yes, you can. Hospitals are very big. They don't have just one obstetrician working for, like, I don't know how many mothers are giving birth. At least 10, I would imagine. It's not just one doctor running around like a headless chicken between all these people giving birth. So, somebody will be there to deliver your baby if you're giving birth in a hospital. It's a little different with midwives, especially if you're giving birth in the summertime. They're always busy. But I mean, it's never too late to switch a provider. You can always find a new one. Some people I know they didn't like their OB. They weren't able to find a new one in time, so they just kept going to their family doctor because that's who was listening to them. So trust your intuition and go with what feels right for you, especially for this. It's all about knowing how to advocate for yourself. So those are the things that I recommend for people to do, but there's also things that you shouldn't do during pregnancy and birth. And it's not so much that it's wrong, it's just like there are things that you don't have to do just because somebody told you had to. So don't feel pressured, but be open. So, like I said, birth is up to the baby. It's very unpredictable. You don't know what might happen in the birth space, which is okay. Sometimes things that aren't expected happen. But that being said, don't let anybody pressure you into something that you're not comfortable doing. So, for example, if you've been in labor for 6 hours and the doctor hasn't checked your cervix, but you don't want to be checked, they're like, oh, well, we really need to because, something could be wrong, or, we need to see where you're at. This is too long of a labor, I've heard before, which I'm like, that makes no sense. I've heard doctors say, you're in bad labor, which I'm like, hello? That's really mean to say. It makes no sense. So if that's a conversation that's being had, it's very easy to feel guilty because then you assume something's wrong with your body, especially if it's your first baby or even your second. Every birth is going to be different. So if your doctor's saying stuff like that to you, it's easy to be like, oh no, like, okay, maybe they're right. I guess this is what I have to do. You absolutely do not have to do it just because they said it. You know your body at the end of the day. And you can always ask, is there time to think about this? Is this a medical emergency? Do I have to decide right now? Can I have time to talk to my support person about this? You can ask those questions. But at the same time, be open to adjustments. There's a lot of people who are very, I don't want to say stubborn, but stuck in how they want things to happen. Which there's nothing wrong with it, but sometimes there are interventions that are necessary. I know I talk about like doctors being a little bit pushy, but sometimes it's necessary. So if there's something happening with the baby that isn't normal and they're suggesting something that you weren't hoping for, you got to be a little bit open to that. Like, okay, let's see, what might happen if the doctor does this thing. Like I said, you can ask, do I have time to think about it? Sometimes the answer might be no, actually, we don't have time to think about this. A lot of people feel that if the doctor has to intervene, they've failed as the mother. You haven't failed anything. Sometimes birth isn't just, yes, it's you who's giving birth, but it's not just one person. It's like a group thing. So you gave birth to the baby with a little bit of help, and it's fine to have help. I don't know anybody who's given birth by themselves anyways. Whether that be in their home with somebody there, somebody holding their hand, someone rubbing their back. You don't want to give birth by yourself. You want somebody who's there to help you and who's there to build you up. So just be open to things, going a different way. Like I said, I chose to fall asleep during my mom's labor, and the doctors had to rotate me. So she definitely wasn't wanting that because I was her third child, and the other two labors were easy breezy, and I chose to shake things up. So, she ended up getting an epidural with me, which she absolutely didn't want. But that was something that she had to be open to. She had to be able to switch her mindset and be like, you know what, this is okay. This is good for me, and this is good for my baby. This is something that I need. And just kind of like having that mindset of like, I'm doing this for myself. That's all the mindset that you need to feel okay with whatever decisions that you're making. Um, and then just knowing like, even if you do have help, you still gave birth to a human. You still created an entire person. Like, you still did something super hard. Not a lot of people can do it. So, like, be proud of yourself in just doing that, even if you did have assistance that you weren't planning on. And then in terms of asking for help, as I mentioned, that's where we kind of think about the postpartum period where people neglect a lot of things. They focus on the baby, they focus on the birth, they forget to plan for postpartum, they forget to plan for themselves. As women, that's just something that we do. Even without kids, we want to nurture. Not everybody, but a lot of women just kind of slip into the nurture role. I know I do it. But that's also just because I work with kids, and that's just like, it's just kind of second nature to me to nurture even adults accidentally. I've been called out multiple times for it. It's just something that I do. So like, yes, nurture your baby, but nurture yourself too. So like I said, plan for postpartum beforehand. Meal prep before. Have people help you with meal prep. Organize ahead of time. Make sure you wash all your baby stuff. I always tell people to pack their birth bags at like 34 or 35 weeks, because once you get into like the 36-week moment, the babies can come at any time pretty much. My nephew decided to come 3.5 weeks early, and my sister didn't have anything packed at all. So, let that be a guide to just be prepared. You can never be prepared too early. If you want to pack your hospital bag in the first trimester, do it. Nobody's judging you. And then for postpartum, feel free to say no to people. If the baby had a rough night and you don't feel like visiting somebody anymore, you can tell them, hey, like, I'm not up for visitors today. I just can't. You don't even owe them an explanation. And anybody who understands postpartum should not be judging you, should not be angry about it. The healing process takes time. So, just like, don't be worried to say no or cancel last minute or not want to see people. Set boundaries for yourself and for your baby. A lot of people have struggles setting boundaries, especially when it comes to the baby, especially with grandparents. Like not kissing the baby when you come over. They're so cute and you want to kiss them, but telling people not to is hard for people to say, especially when it comes to like their own moms. They don't want them to feel disrespected or hurt. So a lot of times people just don't say anything and they just stand there uncomfortably. But as hard as it is, it's a conversation that needs to be had. And, it's going to make you feel more comfortable at the end of the day. It might make you feel guilty for a little period of time, maybe for that day after having that conversation. But the next day, you might be so happy that you had that conversation. and you'll just feel so much more at ease. And not setting boundaries can negatively impact the postpartum experience significantly, especially when it comes to rules for your baby. Because then you're just constantly uncomfortable because nobody's doing what you want, and you're just constantly worried all the time about all the things that people are doing that you don't want. So setting boundaries it's not a bad thing. You can do it. If people are hurt about it, leave them. They don't need to have, permission to see your baby if they're not going to respect you. And with that being said, don't be afraid to ask for help is the next don't for moms. It's hard to ask for help. Even if you don't have a baby, it's hard to ask for help because if you're an independent person, especially women, we're built up to do things by ourselves. And it's just something that, like, it's a natural instinct for a lot of people to do stuff by themselves. So especially when it comes to being a mom, a lot of people think, okay, I'm the mom, I need to do everything. If I don't do everything, I've failed as a mom. But you haven't. It takes a village, as they say. Nobody raises a baby completely by themselves. Even if you're a single mom or a single dad, there's still people around that you would want to help you. And you shouldn't be afraid to ask for assistance, whether it's just like, hey, I just want to take a nap today. Can you come over and just like chill with the baby for a bit? Or I haven't had time to do any laundry in like 2 weeks. The baby has no clothes. They're constantly just in a diaper. I need help with laundry. You can ask for help. It's totally okay. And that's why people like postpartum doulas but even still with that, I've had and I find it so cute and adorable when moms ask me this. Whenever I first see them, they're like, do you mind washing the bottles? Is that something you do? I don't want to put you out. I'm like, I'm literally here to help you. Nothing is off the table. And I just think it's so like pure and innocent because like they don't know, of course. I just love the question because I'm like, yes, like, of course. Thank you so much for asking for help. And I always build them up when they ask me, like when they're able to vocalize it, because the way they say it, I can tell they're terrified to ask. They're so timid. And I'm like, no, like, that's amazing. I'm so glad that you asked me for help. And asking for help is a sign of strength, honestly. It's not a sign of weakness. If you are able to vocalize and tell people, hey, I need help, you are such a strong woman. And I love you for it. And the last thing that people never do enough is taking time for themselves. So there's like a societal expectation that as the mom, you gotta like be with that kid all the time. You can't do anything else until that kid is in school or at least 1 year old. That is very untrue. Of course, there is a certain period of time where you should, just kind of relax and focus on your physical healing. But there's a lot of moments where you can take time for yourself just to like debrief, even just 5 minutes, if you're not comfortable going out and leaving your baby or even taking the baby with you. When the baby's sleeping or even when they're just kind of hanging out, calm and happy, just like going and hiding in the bathroom for a couple minutes or going to get a glass of water and just like taking a deep breath, that's time for yourself. Even if it's just for a couple minutes. If your baby is sleeping and they're safe, just stepping outside on the balcony or wherever you live, if it's like your front porch or your backyard, just getting some fresh air sometimes can just kind of help reset your body. And giving the baby to somebody that you trust, whether it's the other parent or the grandma, a friend, having somebody that you trust to watch your baby, so you can go take a shower or go eat a snack or take a nap. You shouldn't feel guilty for doing that because A well-rested mother is going to do so much more in the day than a mother who's sleep deprived. Because if you're sleep deprived, you can only do so much before you're going to crash. So I always remind moms, like, do not feel guilty if you need to take a nap or you just need like a 20-minute break. A lot of time, like, babies obviously cry a lot. So I also remind moms, like, for example, your partner's at work until 8 p.m. and it's currently 12. Your baby's been screaming for the past 30 minutes and you're losing your mind. You can put the baby down somewhere safe, whether it's their crib, their bassinet, somewhere flat where they're not going to get hurt, and you can step out for a couple minutes. I'm like, it's not going to cause any trauma for the child. It's not going to, like, and it's hard for moms to do just because nobody likes to just leave a crying baby. But sometimes it's really needed. I've told a lot of moms to do that, and a lot of them are like, I had no idea I was allowed to do that. Like, even if they're crying, I'm like, yes, like, because we're human, we get overstimulated. I work with kids. Sometimes they're crying all day, and I need a second. Sometimes I'll ask to go to the bathroom so I can sit in there for 3 minutes just to, like, not hear the crying. Like, and it's fine. Like, it's something that you need. You can't really properly take care of your baby or somebody else's baby if you're so overstimulated that you're going to have a breakdown as well. What's worse than the baby screaming is both of you screaming, and nobody wants that, especially not the one taking care of the child. But that being said, if you need a moment to cry and just, like, let your feelings out, you can do that too. Put the baby down, go into your bathroom, go into your bedroom, wherever, and just take a breath and then come back. Because you're going to be able to take care of your baby so much better after you've had that moment to debrief. The saying, you cannot pour from an empty cup, so putting yourself first is so important. And yeah, I feel like it's never talked about enough. Even to this day, even clients that I've had where I'm like, did you eat today? Did you drink water today? The question is usually, or the answer is always no for the most part. So anytime I go to somebody's house, I'm like, where's your water bottle? And then I find it and I fill it up and I put it next to them. They're like, oh my God, I haven't drinking any water today. And I'm like, I know you haven't. Here you go. So just, like, remind yourself every single day, like, I need to take care of me first so that I can take care of my baby first. And then having people to lean on, whether that's your spouse or your friend or your doula. That kind of ties with asking for help. Just know that you're not doing anything wrong by asking for help and putting yourself first. So if this episode resonated with you, I'm very happy to hear that. If you feel like you need a venting moment or extra support, an ear to listen to, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always here for any moms, any parents in need. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and stay tuned for the next one. The end. Let me... Oof.